purple.
You call that an attack? Pathetic. Although, it is effective at kicking up dust.
Dragon Ball has always been the series where people always try to compare everyone to. How far does Naruto, Ichigo, Luffy, or Saitama make it in it? Could they beat Goku? Could they beat Goku if he had no limbs? Could they even take Raditz and Nappa? Could Gojo take on Captain Ginyu? Let's be real for a moment. It's always been the bar for testing out the new mainstream shows in terms of their strength, as it's also the show that has some of the most blatant displays of power. Whereas most say they will destroy X, or if we don't do this, X will happen, and many other exaggerated plot points, Dragon Ball many times just shows the stuff happening. Many moons, planets, and even galaxies being wiped off screen, until we finally watch them almost punch away the universe in Battle of Gods. Due to this blatant strength showing, it's a good litmus test. But it leads into some absurd details and concessions, such as, what is this giant snake at the start of Dragon Ball Super that Goten thought he had to shoot a Kamehameha to defeat? Wasn't King Piccolo a world-ending entity? Where'd this Goten-level snake come from? Then we'll watch some arcs later. Super Saiyan Goten and Trunks fight Cell Juniors on an island that were annihilating the Z-Fighters during the Cell games. Dragon Ball Daima actually took advantage of this absurd concept by introducing titanic fauna and creatures that the cast couldn't defeat at the time. But one takes the cake as the most legendary and random bar of strength you might really think of. And this one is Dr. Gero's door. This door guarded Gero's lab, and while it was technically blasted down pretty quickly in terms of the actual series, it also has some very good feats, such as tanking the physical strikes of Krillin and Tien put together after the defeat of Mecha Frieza, with Tien visibly striking it with his shoulder and then calling the door tough, implying he put actual effort into his attack on the door. Piccolo then even puts a hand up, implying that a ki blast will actually likely be needed to blow it down. However, Tien and Krillin at this point in the series are actually immensely powerful beings that could even defeat Frieza's Ginyu Force by this point in the story, a group of planet-conquering super aliens that surpass the entire Saiyan race our main hero is based on. Due to this, the question starts to come up. Could Luffy really punch down that door? Could Naruto's Rasengan blow that door down? Be serious for a moment. I mean, sometimes these Rasengans are barely denting a tree. Would Ichigo have to go Bankai on Dr. Gero's door? Do you really believe Jotaro and Star Platinum would punch it down? People want to know, and I have the answers. So sit back and learn some shit. Alright, as a quick heads up, this video was sponsored by Girls Frontline 2, Exilium, which just dropped a massive limited time update called Corposant, and if you've been waiting for a good time to jump in, this is probably it. The patch is stacked. You can get 55 plus free pulls, over 11,000 collapse pieces, a completely free doll, Balthilde, and even a free commander outfit just by participating in the event. That's not even counting the weekly rewards and login bonuses. If you haven't played this game before, it's a turn-based tactical strategy RPG, and you build a squad of dolls, move them on a grid, take cover, use abilities, and build team synergies around them, such as freeze damage or shield setups and mix-ups, etc. It's fully 3D, great graphics, and you can inspect your characters and weapons up close, and it mixes that strategy gameplay with the collection and RPG progression system that many of you will enjoy. The new big character in this update is Alva, which is the leader of Task Force Defy. She's a support unit, but not the boring kind. She turns shields into freeze damage bonuses, so she's basically converts defense into offense. So if you're running a freeze comp, which I advertised earlier, she's kind of a core engine for the whole setup, so it's a good time to get into it. And yeah, she has her own signature weapon banner if you want to go all in on it. There's also a limited mode called Splash Bash, which is also pretty fun and gives you that outfit I talked about earlier. And finally, there are limited time discount skins for Alva, Lena, and Nikita, so if you care about aesthetics, now's the window. If you want to check it out, download Girls Frontline 2 using my link and QR code below and jump into the Corposant event before it's gone. Introducing the wall is simple enough. Dr. Gero, the guy who made the androids in Cell, tries to scrap with Goku and co, and thinking he can actually take them with his new cyborg body, having gauged how strong they all were before they went off to Namek. Of course, the gains on Namek were utterly stupid, as I outline in many videos. This time chamber video, weirdly enough, probably goes into the best detail. And even he, with his max potential Goku calc, comes short of what they become as Super Saiyans, and much more, and has to run away to his lab by abusing the fact he can't be sensed due to being an android. The first moment of this is actually overlooked, as before Dr. Gero escapes into his lab and is actually caught by Krillin, he says something interesting in response to this. He says, "You won't make it in time even if you call all your friends," implying he doesn't think Krillin can actually get to him in time to even do anything once he closes the lab. This isn't objective, but it's the first piece of evidence that Gero's lab doors can possibly intercept Krillin dashing toward them at pretty close quarters, and that he also probably doesn't think Krillin can even break them down to begin with Krillin's friends then taking way too long to arrive if he were to call them. This entire assessment is actually correct, as the friends do not arrive in time, and both Krillin and Tien together can't actually break the doors down. They don't use Ki Blast here, as obviously a Neo Tri-Beam from Tien would definitely blow it down, but even the physical striking stats of Krillin and Tien are immense. Piccolo, upon watching this, actually thinks he'd have to shoot his own Ki Blast at the door, and Vegeta does the same thing later to blow down the door. Probably so that Piccolo didn't backstab him and try to nuke the androids at full power when they were potentially deactivated. In fact, the door itself may have some durability feats beyond Krillin and Tien, as when Vegeta blows the doors down, the doors are slammed and dented into the lab floor, cracking it everywhere, but when Android 17 stomps Dr. Gero's head into paste, the ground doesn't even move. While this could just be a drawing detail, Dr. Gero's body and its durability may not actually be totally reliant on his body being complete, but somewhat of its composition. Although it does seem like Dr. Gero and Android 19 both get more durable as they absorb ki, so you could argue even their cybernetics get enhanced with some type of ki and bodily presence. So we all know where I'm getting to now. What does Gero's assessment and stopping Tien and Krillin's strikes even mean? By this point in the story, Krillin and Tien both have trained for many years in preparation for Trunks' warning of the androids, hearing all about the fact that time-skip Super Saiyans get folded by them and that can zero-diff Mecha Frieza. Meaning anybody that showed up to the android brawl had various reasons for thinking they could do something. Piccolo grows so strong he's called the Super Saiyan type fighter while only being synced with Nail. However, Tien seems to comment about how unbelievable and incredible this actually is, implying he might not be the same. Tien obviously shows up here because his Tri-Beam is cracked, and funny enough, he is unironically strong enough to probably annihilate the androids on some 8 gates guy self-sacrifice energy with the Neo Tri-Beam, having mastered and enhanced the Spirit Tri-Beam from the Saiyan saga he used on Nappa. However, some of their fighters here are interesting, like Kid Gohan and Krillin specifically, with Kid Gohan actually scrapping with Goku and Piccolo during training and likely having more potential than both of them, and kicking Gero off of suppressed Piccolo before Piccolo no-diffs him. Krillin being here then has different stakes. What is he doing? It's not like he has a Neo Tri-Beam trump card, but we have some ideas. Krillin is a powerful combatant, even being uncharitable. Both Tien and Krillin likely surpassed the Ginyu Force by this point, and by a good portion. Krillin, during his initial conflict with second form Frieza, actually reached a power level of 75,000 due to his potential being unlocked by Elder Guru, meaning he pretty much passively went from 13,000 during his fight with Goldo and Daizenshu to around 20,000 during his fight with Ginyu Goku, who was at 23,000. Tien is similar after his King Kai training, being able to take down Jason Birder at the same time, even in just raw stats, both of who have power levels exceeding 40,000. Due to this, Krillin is so good at fighting that even with a 10 times lower power level, he actually harms second form Frieza and even escapes him, and could even threaten him with Destructo Disc. He even shows this level of prowess again in the Android Saga, because even though he doesn't fight the androids, the anime shows us what he can do against Imperfect Cell. The anime in Dragon Ball is usually considered canon, as canon in Dragon Ball isn't properly defined, and the anime is considered acceptable by Toriyama and a part of Dragon Ball. However, even if you disregard the anime is actually the only display of Krillin's efficiency and power level during this moment in the series in full, while everything else is a bit more conjecture. Now, while Imperfect Cell isn't on the level of the androids yet, he is getting there. And not only that, he is far more intelligent and competent at fighting, especially when he is in this stage and his ego hasn't inflated to the size of a solar system. Krillin then saves a mother and daughter from Imperfect Cell, shoulder charges him to the point it inflicts some type of damage and actually shocks him, and then escapes with his life despite the fact Cell has no reason to spare Krillin at this point in the story. If anything, he'd want to take his powers. The same shoulder charge Tien actually does to Gero's door, by the way, bar for bar. Now, while it's likely Cell isn't full power against Krillin, it just shows how powerful he actually is to catch Cell by surprise to this degree. Even after a long cat and mouse chase against him and dodging multiple attacks, many people forget this scene actually happened. Krillin gets stupid amps like this in the anime constantly, with him and Yamcha then going on to surpass Olibu, who fought weighted Pikkon, beyond Cell Games Goku's ability to comprehend in the Buu saga for almost no reason. Therefore, Krillin likely thought he could support the others, whether it be with solar flares, buying time, evasive strategies, and healing them with senzu beans or the like, which he literally does. In fact, he actually would have been so useful he could have single-handedly destroyed the androids with Bulma's remote had he not fallen in love with Android 18. So his experience on Namek was actually vital to his decision to learn he is still useful against people far stronger than him. In fact, he is probably the most experienced member there, besides Gohan and Vegeta. We see this later again in Dragon Ball Super, when he actually defeats Gohan in a fight, and helps a pretty much God level 18 against Shosa during the Tournament of Power, and actually kind of outdoes her. He also would have killed Nappa in a 1v1 during the Saiyan saga, and either way, while he is a weaker cast member, it seems there is some type of ability to provide a type of support. He thinks he can do this in a Super Saiyan level type environment. Anyway, even lowballing, we have an official number of 75,000 for Frieza fight Krillin we can work with. In Dragon Ball, 10,000 is stated in El Manga Legendario to be able to bust a planet. However, a planet in Dragon Ball is actually larger than you might think, with King Cold and Champa both pretty much confirming this. King Cold says the Earth is a small planet for one, and Champa says the Super Dragon Balls, remember Champa is from a twin universe, are almost the size of a planet or around so, despite the Super Dragon Balls being 37,000 kilometers in diameter, with the Earth at only 12.7 thousand kilometers. Better yet, the moon in Dragon Ball is as far from the Earth in Dragon Ball as it is in real life, at least 380,000 kilometers, as Toriyama says, but the Earth from Dragon Ball's moon is proportionally larger in scale than ours would be if you viewed it from that distance. In fact, many times larger. Yet it's still a tiny world to King Cold, the ex-emperor of all things in the universe. Either way, Planet Vegeta that Frieza blows up has 10 times the mass of Earth, and likely much more diameter, accomplishing this at an incredibly casual level, detonating its debris at a few percentages of the speed of light easily on screen, with the calculating yield of energy being enough to deconstruct small stars. This at a level less than 530,000, so over 10,000 you can destroy large planets by our world standards, and by 530,000 you can kind of mess with some smaller stars, which is very consistent with the scaling in DB, considering what Frieza should be able to do at full power. In Dragon Ball, the cast can generally strike as hard as they can shoot a blast, damaging each other with punches and blasts, surviving the blast, or contending with their own. Goku vs. Piccolo in the 23rd Budokai is the best example of this, unless the technique is overly amplified beyond the normal level of strength, like Gohan vs. Cell. At 75k, you would far eclipse 20 times Gravity Goku, who could blast away from a star with his Kamehameha and avoid meteors traveling in deep space, while his ship flew through the universe in days. Even if you were to calculate this a little charitably, you can get up to 2.8 trillion times the speed of light for a ship traveling half the universe in around 6 days, or even greater. Even if it only traveled half the universe going off of the Dragon Ball map, with many Saiyan Saga characters being able to blow up the moon in less than a second, going off of Piccolo and Roshi respectively, possibly in the hundreds. But you have to ask yourself a serious question. Are Krillin and Tien showing up in a battle they can't even keep track of remotely? A battle they can do absolutely nothing to assist in some way in? Are these characters all in the power levels of 150 through 1 billion? And they're not even a few 100,000? Let's say the Neo Tri-Beam from Tien is a huge exponential amp. Is it really going to be a 40 million times multiplier or even higher to some absurd degree? Or is it more likely a couple orders of magnitude? Maybe a couple thousand times greater. These are important because even base Goku in the Frieza Saga is hitting 3 million, and Saiyan Saga Goku hits 150 million, with Tien and Krillin showing up for smoke with guys who would flatline those 150 millions. With them having Super Saiyan Trunks versus Frieza, who rivaled Goku while he was suppressed, fight right in front of them. The Earthlings then go on to scrap a bit with Cell Juniors in the anime. Tien in the movies beats base Future Trunks in a fight, and in the Buu arc they can fight Olibu and get complemented by Buu tanks. In Super they can fight in the Tournament of Power with far less training than Goku and Vegeta, and so on and so forth. Realistically, Tien and Krillin are hitting a few million battle power by this point, and they have no anti-feats in this regard. If anything, that's probably severe downplay. A possible objective case for this is that there is a GT guidebook that talks about the Super Dragon Fist and Goku's Kamehameha times 10 as a Super Saiyan 4. And it says the Kamehameha times 10 is his ultimate technique. So a Super Kamehameha with a possible Kaioken times 10 is greater than the Dragon Fist, which is greater than any technique in history. Meaning it'd be a greater multiplier than the Neo Tri-Beam, since that's a technique in history. So, going off of that, you'd be able to say that potentially the Neo Tri-Beam, more than likely only a few orders of magnitude in terms of an increase. So these characters being in the millions is very, very likely. And in fact, it makes literally no sense if the Neo Tri-Beam is like a 50 billion times increase. I think most people would agree with that.
There's this notion of what 99% of fiction actually means. If we take the term literally, it would be characters from sitcoms and dramas which make up the vast majority of fictional works. Within the power scaling sphere, this is often ignored or not considered at all. And the 99% number refers to popular verses, so we will be going over some popular characters and verses who are probably victims of the door and cannot break through the door with raw strength. Only factoring in raw strength, Gon and Hunter x Hunter as a whole are stonewalled by the door. There's characters like Homelander, who is stronger than any weapon on Earth. However, that won't scratch the door. There's no weapon on Earth that can destroy the planet. He is in crossovers in Mortal Kombat or DCKO, but I wouldn't consider those to be essential Homelander or the real one. Even with his eye lasers, the door is more than likely not being melted down, as the kinetic energy from Krillin and Tien should be way higher than heat spikes. However, some argue that Heat in Dragon Ball has a unique ability to ignore durability unless bodies are enhanced with ki, whereas the door has no ki. Even Attack on Titan, with the Colossal Titan probably stubbing his toe on the door, only being compared to a large nuclear bomb. However, series like Fallout do have an extra quality about them, such as their incredible hacking abilities and luck when it comes to guessing random long series of codes and entry points. But as an example, a fat man or something like that won't do anything to the door. But getting into verses that seem like they would be more of a conventional powerhouse that could break down the door, let's talk One Piece. There are some calcs of the One Piece world being so titanically massive that if One-Beard was to slam his halberd on the ground and shatter it into atoms, that it would be above star level. And sure, yeah, if you believe that, then they can break down the door. But do you believe that? Of course, unless you think the One Piece and Dragon Ball crossovers are canon, that's another thing to talk about. Then Luffy is scrapping with Super Saiyan Blue Goku in Gear 4 or something. Well, that's probably not the case. Some people think that this Toon Force just Duranegs Beerus or Jiren or would just beat up MUI Goku or something. But I hate to break it to you, but Dragon Ball also has probably its own Toon Force scaling. So in the Arale episode of Dragon Ball Super, Vegeta has some dialogue which implies that he at some point in the past has encountered a gag character. And if we go back to the early parts of Namek, the dialogue seems to imply that until Earth, Vegeta is seemingly capped at a power level of 18,000 or lower and stagnates. So this would mean Vegeta presumably fought a type of gag character or battled them and came out thinking he was only surpassed by Frieza and so on, and thus base Toon Force isn't enough to get through the door. Now, he could have also done this after the Frieza saga, but that Vegeta also would still probably scale to base Krillin and Tien based off of the imperfect cell fights. Weirdly enough. Even in older game material, Goku is considered by many shonen authors, even around the time of the Namek arc, to be stronger than other characters in the magazine, including gag characters, while he had a power level of around 90,000. With Arale not being a typical gag character with types of Toon Force, but an immense powerhouse that can pop stars and so forth with the twig. Speaking of similar gags, in Ed, Edd and Eddy, there's a scene where Eddy accidentally eats the sun and makes it night, so if this is literally happening, Ed, who is stronger than him, might be able to just chew the door down. Now, moving on to the other two in the big three, Naruto and Ichigo both also have the issues of not really using their versus universal magic system. Like, Naruto doesn't use that many unique jutsu, and Ichigo never uses, say, Aikido or something like that. One could present the argument based on Obito's True-Seeking Orbs destroying Hiruzen's giant shurikens, but these are likely shadow shurikens or a jutsu and not just normal metal. Personally, I don't have an issue with True-Seeking Orbs erasing things. In this very same scene, Hiruzen compares it to Inoki's particle style, which has no restriction on the makeup of objects. It should be noted that Dragon Ball has weaker characters with atomization capabilities. such as Piccolo's self-proclaimed statement in the 23rd World Tournament, which is backed up probably by the lore, as if you're killed by Piccolo or a demon, you can't be reincarnated or sent to the afterlife. There's also another statement that Trunks reduces Frieza to atoms in Daizenshu. So I do think a distinction should be made between atomic disassembly and atomization via energy, as one is a specific hacks that, say, disassembles things like a puzzle, and the other is a very energetic, destructive event. So be sure to keep this in mind for later characters who may have types of atomic capabilities. All Might might have a quirk that allows the user to open any door or something. My hero is kind of cooked outside of potentially Shigaraki's decay, withering the door like a rot over time, which is similar to another character I'll bring up later. As a fun fact, in that old video game and interviews, Namek Goku was stronger than Jotaro. While it's just a dumb crossover, it's still kind of funny. The final one that's kind of funny might be Chainsaw Man. He might just be able to eradicate the concept of door if he ate a door devil. At this point, the durability of the door should be evident if it wasn't already. It acts as a pretty decent gatekeeper for a lot of series. I think you guys get the idea of what can't break down the door. But now we're going to go into a few characters that I think are interesting that can break down the door. And then with that, we'll go into the final section of the video. Of course, many characters could just teleport through the door. A better example of what we want to know in this video would be, say, like Kakashi from Naruto, with the same power as the teleporting Obito, just ripping a hole in space instead, with the Kamui just rip a hole in the door. And to give some credit, you might be able to argue that Frieza and the like are above, say, a black hole that can warp and bend space, so maybe they should have resistance to something like that, but that's mainly conjecture. Kaguya likewise has the expansive truth-seeking orb, just like Naruto, that can potentially destroy a dimension that might have stars or massive planetary ranges, such as, you know, an Earth-sized planet to the moon. Moving on to the final big three, we have Bleach, with characters like Barragan of the Espada, who could age the door into dust. With Ulquiorra, for instance, having the ability to tap his finger in the air and go through space as he pleases. I think a solid thing that might be able to chop through the door is the Sokyoku halberd, as the halberd can destroy anything in existence, which includes souls, spatial barriers, or anything of the like. However, whether or not it's star level or something is a discussion for another day. To wrap up the big three, One Piece also has advanced devil fruits, which when awakened can perform transmutation. But these hacks abilities do require some further argument. They would Duraneg or out-hacks a door stronger than what they've been shown to manipulate. Oddly enough, most specifically, the Door fruit. I mentioned Full Metal Alchemist earlier, and yeah, they could transmute the door just like Ed does with the gate at the end of the series. However, they lack the ability to actually break down the door with raw AP, even if you include Father's potential miniature star showing. The energy to create that isn't actually impressive, and it wasn't really his power by the time Ed is actually fighting him later. And then finally, as the intro of this video went over, there's the topic of Gojo and JJK. And sure, if you genuinely believe that Hollow Purple is a erasing attack, he could erase a hole in the door. Or if you believe red or blue is genuinely strong enough to somehow open a hole in the door via matter manipulation or spatial manipulation. In terms of sheer attack potency though, Gojo is utterly stonewalled by the door, with one of the most powerful, just insane feats in JJK being a planetary black hole, which required Yuki to like 8 gates, sacrifice herself to do it. Gojo's Hollow Purple is also stated to rip through space and extra material, and by its descriptors it makes some sense, but it's a bit more debatable due to how it's demonstrated. Saitama would punch the door down. We see this in his fight with Garo, that a punch can casually destroy dozens of stars on page, and you don't really get much more blatant than that. Something a bit more interesting here is maybe Pokemon. In Pokemon, you have Palkia and Dialga, the embodiments of space and time. They're definitely getting to the door, right? As someone who hasn't seen like the 1,000+ episodes of Pokemon, but I'm willing to admit there is a lot of crazy stuff you can look into it. Characters like SpongeBob could unravel the door like he did the entire universe in the String episode. Peter Griffin, he could bang 2 metal detectors together and he either destroys the universe or travels till the end of time when the door no longer exists. That's a real thing that happens, by the way. Look that up. On the other topic of more generic OP characters that are in other mediums, I think we should talk about the MCU. So the MCU is really dependent on a few things, the first being the statement about Thor when he forges Stormbreaker in the Infinity War movies. Now, yes, it is stated he takes the force of a star, but we should put it into context. For one, this was calced as like basically below planet level. I could put it in this video here. For one, he takes the energy coming off the star, but for those who don't know, star level is specifically the amount of energy required to overcome the gravitational binding energy of the star, so it can't hold itself together. Not just the amount of energy it exerts. So even if we say Thor no-souled it, he wouldn't actually be star level as an example. He'd just be taking pieces of its overall energy over time that are exerted over his specific surface area. Not the entire thing all condensed and shot in one instance that he just tanked like Broly. In fact, that Stormbreaker forging scene, if it was blasted right at Jiro's door, the door would not budge. So keep that in mind as well. The other issue is when we talk about Thanos. So in Avengers Endgame, he famously says he's going to shred the universe down to its last atom, and then, with the stones the Avengers get him, he will remake the universe. So if you accept that Endgame Thanos is universal or something, then he or anyone who scales to him can break down the door. However, if we are more conservative and use vaguely planetary as the AP tier based on the Power Stone statement you get in the first Guardian of the Galaxy movie, and what Thanos can casually do to the moon in Infinity War, then Thanos can't break the door down with brute strength. However, the Gauntlet probably gives him many hacks abilities, regardless, that allow him to get through the door, but this would leave the rest of the Avengers high and dry besides the like of, say, like Ant-Man, Vision, and Doctor Strange, who have their own ways through it. Other characters who might be able to hack through it are characters, say, like Spider-Man or Iron Man. Spider-Man is shown hacking a door in Homecoming using a calculator, and Tony Stark is famous for building, an arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps. It is entirely likely they could hack the door, even in MCU, or Tony could scan for fingerprints on the keypad or blah blah blah. Honestly, canonically, if they were in the same verse, he'd probably know Dr. Gero, weirdly. If androids even have fingerprints, this also calls into question how advanced Gero's security actually is, but I don't think there's any information on that one way or the other. Arkham Batman also could potentially hack through the door by grabbing fingerprints or some other way, but he would not be able to blow down the door, though, obviously. Not with the explosive gel, which calcs to whatever, you get it. Batman is probably like building level or something, who cares. Star Platinum from JoJo's is basically the same story. While physically strong, debatably one of the physically strongest, he isn't strong enough to just break down the door. Even the best calcs for the tooth-smashing feat just don't hold a candle to what the door scales to. But Star Platinum can become intangible and face the door. A character like Dan from Naruto can turn into a ghost and stuff, probably be able to do the same thing. However, Jotaro can't do this. So I will say, though, based off of chapter 156 of Dragon Ball Z, it is very likely that the controls to the door are actually likely on the other side of the door, so if Star Platinum can just go to the other side, he could open the door. And this would be a tactic most stands could do, and a lot of jutsu casters or teleporters could also do for teammates or something. The door has zero resistance to spatial hacks that is really known. There's some scaling of Android Art Krillin. He used the Garlic Jr. filler where he is fighting guys kind of pressing Piccolo somewhat after they are amped by the Makio Star. And these guys are all in the millions of power level, just like before at the end of the arc, Garlic Jr. whips out the Dead Zone as his trump card, which is noted as a hyperspace. The fact he does this shows that the characters didn't scale to it when it was used the first time in the Saiyan Saga either, and doesn't mean he does now either. And to give some credit, you might be able to argue that Frieza and the like are above, say, a black hole that can warp and bend space, so maybe they should have resistance to something like that, but that's mainly conjecture. You need a higher interpretation of mid-Dragon Ball for this, such as the otherworld is some higher dimensional realm, and Tien can shake a higher dimensional planet with a mallet and filler or something. To keep this in theme of the elements, we should talk about Avatar. Metal bending would work if the door had impurities in the metal for Toph or any other metal bender to detect and then bend it. Another character in this camp would be Adam Eve from Invincible. You might be able to just disassemble it on an atomic level once again. World Slash from Sukuna could also possibly cut the door, as the slash isn't actually cutting the subject, but rather the world itself. Maharaga, interestingly, could adapt to the door, as he does with Limitless and with Dabura in the current JJK manga. Adapting the concepts such as hard metal would probably be easy, even if it was just him adapting to walking or phasing through it. Maharaga's adaptation will go to infinite degrees, literally, like not to be a no limits fallacy, like it actually provably infinite, to the point he can adapt to a sphere of infinite points, which would have infinite AP because it was made of bug, and he had already fully adapted to bug. There are some characters in JoJo's, such as in part 7, such as shooting a nail bullet at the door and then using a split ability to pry the door open, which is shown working on a barrier which spans infinite universes. So, not AP, but hacks that does quite literally open the door. Giorno from Part 5 could also use his Lightbringer ability from Gold Experience to turn the door into a living creature, like the door is now 2 elephants or something, then a door. The Hand from Part 4 could try and erase the door, as well as Vanilla Eyes from Part 3. As we covered earlier, the door doesn't resist erasure. There are many other things, like Killer Queen Bomb from Part 4, blah blah blah, but you get the idea with that.
The Invincible universe is one that is seemingly on the surface level quite simple to scale, as most people refer to the destruction of the planet Viltrum as their absolute best feat, and they may even think that these space conquerors aren't even planetary on their own. But there are multiple statements and feats and multipliers that prove otherwise. For instance, the solar flare causing nuke feat in Season 3 is at least planetary plus to large planetary, due to it being stated superior to other planetary level solar flares that we have seen in real life. But the reason it likely gets to those large planetary ranges is due to solar flares being caused potentially by a star's magnetic field becoming entangled with the magnetic field of a large object such as a Jupiter-sized planet, which may imply that this nuke can actually rival solar flare-causing phenomena. And even then, Mark brushed it off with like no injury nor with damage to his menacing blue suit. The nuke might not seem that strong, but it's actually pretty damn insane because even if we threw all of our nukes, the moon, and our entire planet at our star, it would not make a solar flare. Omni-Man, a high-tier Viltrumite, even thinks that something like a black hole itself might be necessary to kill him for good, which would make sense since even planet and stellar scale destroying weaponry, as showcased with the Sundisk feat, are not a guaranteed win con against even lower tier Viltrumites. Not to mention that the Unopan Alan the Alien, even way before his peak, was able to withstand these weapons without any injury, which Mark was skilled to as well, due to his battle with an even stronger Alan in the time skip. Mark also scales from post-amp Tech Jacket, who has a 10 times confirm multiplier, whom even pre-amp could already defeat several Mark variants at the same time and could fight Viltrumite veterans. Invincible, Alan, Omni-Man, and other high tiers in the Viltrumite War could also keep up with and defeat multiple elite Viltrumite hybrids at the same time, with one of these alone already being several times stronger than early season Mark, who survived that nuke, could defeat Conquest, but who could also fight several Mark variants at the same time even while distracted, even those who could kill adult Viltrumites like Omnimark. This is very consistent because we do see Mark fight against multiple invincible Reanimen, who are basically invincibles, with a stamina, reflex, and strength boost. Dinosaurus, who will show up in Season 4, was able to one-shot a greatly restored Omnipotus, who was able to wipe out planets, star systems, and potentially even entire universes. I will admit his power is a bit weird to scale because he seems to mostly be able to trigger the larger scale destruction through chain reactions, but regardless, to induce something of that magnitude, it's fair to say that even a super small fraction of that power is still well above planetary, since even the powered Omnipotus took virtually all of the Earth's heroes to defeat. And by the way, that same bite from Dinosaurus was effortlessly tanked by Thrag, who Mark could damage in their final battle, and he would have outright surpassed him following the time skip. Thrag and other elite Viltrumite tiers like Emperor Invincible and Battle Beast are strong enough to hold back and throw Ragnars like a projectile with the whip, and they can even one-shot strong elite Viltrumite tiers, which is something that most Viltrumites are not able to do to each other since they usually have close or competitive battles. Ragnars, by the way, are Viltrumite killing monsters who alone, and even while groggy, can be a deadly challenge for even Omni-Man alongside Alan the Alien, who on their own are already strong enough to battle several Viltrumites at the same time. I know people will bring up that these guys cannot really fight for long periods of time in the sun and say that by default this means they're fodder, but it's not like most Dragon Ball characters can either due to even Namek Saga Goku fearing lava in his battle with Frieza, or even pre-Buu Saga Gohan believing that lava would somehow be enough to kill Broly. So there's a stark difference between overall durability and low or high temperature resistance, and such factors should be considered. Invincible and his Empire also fight the Timeskip Tech Jacket, who has superior upgrades to not only his 10 times Zamp, but also his mechanized giant robot form that could fight a galaxy to universal level threat that was like a cosmic virus basically, and it was confirmed in the comic and the official summaries as being able to end reality itself. But anyways, back to the Planet Viltrum feat, this is pretty crazy because Space Racer's gun is outright showcased and stated as being able to wipe out entire stars. Yet, even a shot from it alone was not enough to wipe out the planet, which infers that this might be a hypergiant planet more durable than most stars, even if that wouldn't make sense by real-life standards. And this in itself might make it similar to the higher-end interpretations for planet Vegeta's size, given by how the Daizenshu states that the planet has 2 suns, which may not necessarily mean the stars orbit the planet, but that in itself has insane connotations, given that the planet has to logically have immense levels of gravity to stay intact against the tidal forces of the stars themselves. Generally, the Viltrumites being able to damage or even break down the manga Gero door is not out of the question, especially for the high tier characters and if they build up their speed to further amplify their striking power, although it was still proved to be quite difficult. If we are using the anime Gero door, then that is another story entirely, and the Viltrumites would likely splat up against the door, even if we gave them like the higher end scaling alongside their spaceship and weaponry. And this is because the anime Dr Gero door scales up from Fatigue Frieza, who even while basically nearly dead, was able to survive Namek's explosion, which is stated in the summaries and showcased in the episode as being able to light up a galaxy, which might infer solar system to multi-solar system levels of power, even for those guys well under what the Android Saga characters were training for. Monsterverse Godzilla and the other monsters who scale from him, such as the alien wyvern King Ghidorah and Shimo, the Ice Age causing Titan, can indeed break down the door, but it is a bit harder to prove due to their on-panel feats versus the on-panel statements or director and author insight. When it comes to energy range and destructive capacity, we do see country and even multi-continental ranges of power, such as when Shimo froze the Earth in a short period of time, when a much younger Godzilla survived being close to a mass extinction level meteor impact, and when King Ghidorah would have been able to wipe out the Earth's ecosystem in a few weeks to months passively, with even one of his storms alone already being able to envelop all of Brazil. However, the Monarch Legacy of Monsters show, which is canon, the novels, and interviews, all showcase a much larger power scale. You see, Godzilla, even prior to the King of the Monsters movie when he fought Ghidorah, was already more or less equal to the Hollow Earth's energy source, which has been described as being a pseudo-star of sorts that helps fuel the vegetation and megafauna that can exist within it. This is pretty crazy because just the Hollow Earth portals alone already rival the energy readings of supernovas, pulsars, and black holes, which is further confirmed by Adam Wingard in interviews. And again, there are multiple portals that are linked to this energy source. So this Hollow Earth is more akin to being a star system, if not even like a multi-star system that is encased within the Earth itself. Godzilla then goes on to get several amps from nuclear absorption, which made him more agile and made his spikes more notable, and after defeating and assimilating the energy from a supercharged Tiamat who literally feeds off of solar flares, he unlocked his Kaioken-inspired evolved state that grants him a 2x multiplier at least, but quite possibly up to 20 times if you think the energy capacity statement also applies to his overall attack power. This Rose form is heavily implied to be stronger than even the Burning Godzilla state that wiped out an amped King Ghidorah from years before, since even the supercharged Blue state that wiped out Tiamat was already giving the Monarch scientists a similar feeling to what they briefly saw from Burning Godzilla, which infers that this supercharged state with a stronger base form is somewhat relative or comparable to his Burning state with a weaker base form. There's also numerous mentions of stars and other cosmic stuff in the novels and the movies, which further allude to this level of power being more than mere hyperbole. So as you can see, these high-tier monsters are quite possibly in those large star to solar system plus ranges of power in terms of raw attack potency, which I think should be well more than enough to break down the manga Gero door. But going off of the anime upscaling, it might prove to be a lot harder to do so, but I do think they would still be able to damage it at least. Within the iconic gaming titan of the past, Halo, there is a blue savior known as Cortana, a heavily advanced AI crafted from Dr. Catherine Halsey herself that became one of the most important latchkeys for mankind's resolve of survival against a genocidal covenant due to her insane catalog, rapid calculations, and wide range of learning and comprehension that helped her to not only translate, but also hack into or modify Forerunner and Covenant technology. Which, sure, Dr. Gero's tech is very advanced in terms of raw power, but baseline in terms of range or capabilities, it doesn't quite compare to what these aliens can do because not only do they have a wider cosmological dominion, but they're also able to map out and conquer star systems and their energy sources. And the Forerunners were outright able to manipulate supernovas and make Dyson Sphere-like structures to preserve entire planets from the Flood's infection, and the life-nuking galaxy-range halo rings, which themselves have the diameter of planets. To explain this better, hopefully, there is a hypothetical scale in the real world called the Kardashev scale, which goes from 1 to 4, and it basically measures the amount of energy a civilization has harnessed and mastered, and for reference, we are like at 0.7 to 0.8 right now. A Type 1 civilization can make use of their entire planet's resources, level 2 their star system, level 3 their entire galaxy, and at the proposed tier 4, the civilization can master their galaxy cluster or even the entire universe. The Forerunners were quite clearly in that level 3 to 4 range at least, if not even greater, so if Cortana can decipher how to work around even something this complicated, then she should very well be able to hack into Gero's door. Quite easily, I'd reckon.
Hey everyone, Crisis here, and to cap off this saga of the door, we should go over some door comparisons and how Dr. Gero's door compares to many other popular ones in fiction. The different doors of the multiverse. To start off, let's talk about the Gates of Truth from Full Metal Alchemist. Now, Seth covered them earlier, and yeah, they just don't have the feats they would need to even compare to Dragon Ball characters. Even if we say the gate manifesting is a feat and use the largest one in the series, it isn't even moon level. I know a lot of people vibe scale Truth from Full Metal Alchemist, but vibes don't stand up to the might of Dr. Gero. Next up, we should talk about the 1,000-year door from Mario. The door in question is an endgame door and is able to trap the Shadow Queen behind it. Mario has its own wacky scaling that is a bit too much to get into for this video, but to put it blatantly, one of the crystal stars Mario uses to unlock the door gives him an attack called Supernova. It has also been stated in guides that the crystal stars have the ability to blow up the universe. Like a few of the characters mentioned, I am willing to bet this door is just stronger. I would be shocked if it actually turned out to be below star level. The door from Monsters Inc. sure is interesting. They seem to be normal doors with magical properties, and I genuinely doubt there are any star level feats within the series. Maybe you could use one to get into Gero's lab, bypassing the door entirely. I think we should move on to doors that definitely beat Gero's door, like to the point where it's not even close. The first being the Oblivion Gates from Elder Scrolls. For those who don't know, Elder Scrolls isn't just some grounded fantasy series. It is a very esoteric mythos with a very strong cosmology. To put it into perspective, the oceans of Nirn are called higher dimensional, with the character talking about how only having 3 dimensions makes things so much simpler, and how if your character could see what oceans are, you would go insane. And if you consider how much of a threat the Oblivion Crisis was in the game Oblivion, yeah, the gates and really Elder Scrolls as a whole is just way beyond Dragon Ball's pay grade. The Oblivion Gates should easily outscale Gero's door by a wide margin. The second would be the TARDIS. Doctor Who is like Elder Scrolls in that way, where you look at it on the surface level and it's just some show about this guy who travels in time, but in reality, it truly is a sort of cosmic show. Like in one old episode, the TARDIS uses a tractor beam to grab a neutron star and pull it in the opposite direction. Because of how gravity works, this ends up calking out at around solar system level, which is way more than enough to beat up Gero's door. The same goes for the Gate of Cain in Warhammer 40k. The seal in the dark city of Kamara. It is essentially a giant dam holding back the raw forces of chaos from the city. See, Kamara isn't just a city on a planet, it is located in this structure called the Webway. For the sake of this video, we'll say the Webway is a set of tunnels in and out of the warp. It is a bit more complex than that in actuality. Anyway, this gate held up with loads of events throughout Warhammer, including the failed apotheosis of the Dark King, which has been described as shaking all of creation. And this gate was only broken by the birth of Yanid, who's described as residing in a place the Chaos Gods cannot even look at. Needless to say, even at a basic level, this far exceeds Gero's door. In Star Wars, there are a variety of impressive doors, such as in Phantom Menace, where even a council-level Jedi Master Qui-Gon has to painstakingly and slowly cut through this door within a random spaceship with his saber, as opposed to using the Force to push it apart or blow it off its hinges. If it wasn't for his unorthodox perspective, he would be on the Council, which consists of the best Jedi in the Order. He's also shown fighting Darth Maul, even while nerfed, as older EU sources describe the Sith's ability to dampen the Jedi's Force powers. Despite that, Jin can still keep up with and backhand the assassin, who is stated in sources to be one of the deadliest Sith of all time. At face value, this would at least put him into the same category, in terms of raw Force potency, as Darth Nihilus, who can drain and contain the energy of an entire planet, Darth Bane, who could crack a planet apart, and Naga Sadao, who could cause supernovas by detonating multiple multiple stars, yet Jin couldn't easily get through this random door. Zelda and many video games are almost all about solving puzzles and opening doors. As I've described in my video, despite being a godly hero wielding the Triforce of Courage, which each of the 3 pieces contain a potent portion of divine beings who even accidentally forged multiple universes according to the old Zelda website, with other magic spells drawing on their godly powers or medallions sporting the sage's abilities. Link still absolutely has to get keys to navigate various dungeons. Even the official Ocarina of Time guidebook canonizes that fact. Link with the Master Sword, which can harm Demise, a demon with planet-busting lore who murdered a goddess, a being at least comparable to the demon Majora, who can generate his own parallel reality and pocket dimension housing a star, can't use this weapon or any of his attacks to just break these locks and move along in his quest. This is true for every single Zelda game, no matter the magic amps, state of the Master Sword, every other spell or weapon you unlock, you gotta get a key or you can't progress.